What if I told you Alberta's future might not be Canadian? A high-level delegation from Alberta is heading to Washington, D.C. to discuss secession, either as an independent nation or as part of the United States. And Trump? Well, he may just be listening. Ottawa doesn't want you to hear about this, but Alberta lawyer Jeffrey Rath is exposing it all. The stakes couldn't be higher. Is Canada's breakup inevitable? Jeffrey Rath is a lawyer at Rath and Company in Alberta. He's a seasoned legal advocate with over 2 decades of experience. And again, he's leading the delegation to Washington, D.C. to explore the possibility of Alberta becoming the 51st state of America. Jeffrey Rath, welcome to the Richard Syrett Show. How are you?
I'm great. How are you today, Richard?
Terrific. First of all, what led to the formation of this Alberta delegation?
Well, it's actually the culmination of a number of years of work done by an organization that I was involved in founding along with Dennis Modry and others in Alberta called the Alberta Prosperity Project. And the Alberta Prosperity Project is an organization dedicated to educating Albertans on the benefits of independence, separate and apart from Canada. I think, as a lot of Canadians know, Alberta has literally been the cash cow for Canada for far too long. Over $30 billion in tax revenues leave Alberta every year, never to come back, with at least 14 billion of it every year going to Quebec, who cooks their books every year so that they can have gold-plated social services that Albertans can only dream of, paid for by Albertans, while Alberta has to borrow money and run deficit budgets to pay for our hospitals, pay for our roads, etc. Quebec gets to siphon 14 billion a year out of Alberta, claim to be a have-not province, yet runs surplus budgets on a regular basis. It's an insult to hardworking Albertans. And now, to compound that foolishness, we have politicians from Quebec, specifically Justin Trudeau, and I refer to him as the gibbering Gibault, but our so-called climate change minister, who actually think that by taxing people to death, they can change the weather. So, we live in a regime where now, they talk about the tariffs and how horrible the tariffs are for Canada. Well, what about hardworking Albertans who can't right now afford to put gas in their trucks or diesel in their trucks to go to work, gas in their cars to go to work, heat their homes, pay for housing, because of the fact that rents have been driven through the roof through Justin Trudeau's, unchecked immigration lack of plan, where he's been flooding Alberta with immigrants without any care for whether or not we have room for them or not, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the world that we live in, and Albertans are sick and tired of living in this world. We're fed up with it, and we're tired, quite frankly, of being governed by idiots from Quebec and Ontario.
So true. I was just going to say we're so upset about a 25% tariff, and yet April 1st, less than a month away, we've got 23% increase in the carbon tax coming our way. Nobody seems to be talking about that.
No, and I'm sure the reason that Trudeau and the rest of them are upset about the tariffs is because it's going to make it that much harder for them to hide the pain that's being caused by the 23% increase in the carbon tax.
So this trade war, would you say that was the tipping point, the last straw?
Well, for me, really, I mean, this has been an ongoing project of the Alberta Prosperity Project going back a number of years now. The Alberta Prosperity Project, we now have over 66,000 members. We have more members than the Conservative Party of Alberta currently, right? So we're not a small organization. Those are 66,000, Albertans who are committed to volunteering their time to help get Alberta the hell out of Canada because we're all fed up with it. So, this is not a small, haphazard movement. I think what happened was with the tariff war, and literally, as little as a month ago, we have, Gibault, shocked when he came to the realization that they couldn't cut off Alberta oil to the United States to punish the United States for the tariffs, because if they cut off Alberta oil to the United States, they'd effectively be cutting off the oil to Quebec and Ontario, because the environment minister, the climate change minister, who has so much input into our pipelines, did not know that the Alberta oil that flows to Ontario and Quebec goes down through the United States and comes up through the Enbridge Line 9. So Gibault, the climate change minister, Trudeau, and Doug Ford were also ignorant that they had no idea where the hell their oil came from and how it got there. And they're
So
just, oh, we'll just shut off oil to the United States. And some of us in Alberta are chuckling, oh, okay, well, you're saying what Lockheed said back in the 70s, let the Eastern bastards freeze in the dark, I guess. You want to shut off the oil to Ontario, but you go right
yeah,
ahead.
yeah.
Right?
Little did he realize we would be doing it to ourselves.
Well,
So
no, sorry, go ahead.
well, I was going to ask you about this delegation, and it's been described as some of them have deep ties in Washington, D.C. I mean, can you tell how much can you tell us about this delegation? Are we talking about people who have friendly relationships already with maybe members of the Trump administration?
Yeah, no, that's it exactly. And in fact, um, I don't want to get into too much detail because there's been a lot of, there's been, a lot of personal attacks levied at me already. There's lots of, like, unfortunately, I've kind of become a bit of a lightning rod with regard to this. People that we're working with, I'm trying to spare that, trying to spare them, that kind of, those kinds of problems until we're ready to, announce, who it is that's going. But we have retired MPs. We even have sitting MLAs that want to come as observers. And of course, we would welcome them with open arms.
And
To come along with us.
What has been what have you received a formal response? I mean, are you going to have a meeting at Mar-a-Lago? What has the response been?
Well, the plan is to meet with officials appointed by the Trump administration to discuss on an exploratory basis what Alberta independence in the context of either joining the U.S. as a territory or potentially at some point full statehood would look like. We have identified contacts within the Trump administration. We're working to look at setting schedules and so on. And again, I don't want to get into too much detail at this stage because there's, I think, far too many people that are looking to disrupt what we're doing. So we're working ahead to get things done and scheduled, and when that's done, we'll be making the appropriate announcements.
And I mean,
we certainly know that our delegation is going to be favorably received. I don't know if you saw the other day, but Elon Musk tweeted out this morning. I think he was picking up on Charlie Kirk retweeting that tweet of Rachel Parker's that got 7. I think we're probably up over 10 million views now, but Elon Musk retweeted that he thought it was a very good idea that Alberta should become a U.S. state. So it's nice to see that Elon's on board, and we'll probably be reaching out to him for some additional tech support.
I know this is putting the cart before the horse and so forth, but what is the mechanism? What is your understanding of the mechanism for Alberta to leave Canada and join and become the 51st state?
Well, first of all, it's not a done deal that Alberta, that even people within our group, are in favor of statehood. Again, this is an exploratory meeting, right? Quite frankly, the first step is to have a referendum in Alberta to remove ourselves from Canada and to become an independent state. And I mean, we're, as far as that is concerned, given the favorable response we're getting from Washington, once Alberta removed itself from Canada by referendum, we have no doubt whatsoever that we would be recognized by the United States as an independent state. And, and the process for becoming a state in the United States is clearly spelt out. It includes a request from the legislature. It includes, that you have to provide, you have to draft a state constitution. And of course, a lot of us that are involved in this process of creating an independent Alberta want a constitution for an independent Alberta in any event. And, there's, that work has been underway for some time in terms of creating, a standalone at-home Alberta constitution, that will, be a much stronger, more individual rights friendly constitution than the Constitution of Canada that we all labored under, during COVID, where we were all surprised to find out that we didn't have rights to religious liberty. We didn't have rights to freedom of expression. We didn't have freedom of mobility because Section 1 of the Canadian Constitution could be interpreted by the courts, in such a way as to actually find that, that anything stated by the government, to be an emergency would override all rights in the Canadian Constitution. So that was, that's all part of the process, and obviously, those discussions and that work have been ongoing in Alberta for some time under the auspices of the Alberta Prosperity Project that I'm involved with.
Is confederation broken irreparably to your mind? I mean, if we get an election and we get a conservative government, let's say under Pierre Poilievre, have you no confidence that he can mend these fences?
None whatsoever. I mean, you just have to look at it's a structural problem. From an Alberta perspective, it's a purely structural problem, right? We can't amend the Constitution without the involvement of Quebec and Ontario. Quebec is never going to agree to any amendments that favor the rights of Albertans. Certainly, and even look at the way the so-called transfer payments or equalization provisions of the Constitution have been interpreted. There's nothing in there that requires $30 billion a year to leave Alberta for Quebec, right? But and you read those provisions, they're purely aspirational, in the event that, so that all provinces can have a like level of social services. We aspire that, it's a very aspirational provision that's now been interpreted as somehow being written in stone. And every 5 years, somebody like Trudeau, without consultation with Alberta, which is what he did last time, can just completely reanimate whatever the last formula was and continue taking money from Alberta to give to Quebec without Alberta having any say in it whatsoever. So from an Alberta perspective, the Canadian Constitution is broken. Confederation has never worked for Alberta. We've always been treated as a colony of Quebec and Ontario to the detriment of this province. The Laurentian elites have done very well, by the status quo. And Albertans, as a rule, haven't. I mean, let's just look at what went on in this recent tariff war that Trudeau started on purpose, as far as I'm concerned, right? So we'll shut off Alberta oil. That'll teach the Americans. At no point have we heard Doug Ford say, hey, I'm going to shut down the automotive parts plants for 2 or 3 days and completely disrupt North American supply chains for automobiles to show them how integrated the industry is. That'll teach him a lesson. No, Doug Ford isn't interested in hurting jobs in Ontario, but God damn it, he'll shut the oil production down in Alberta, right? They'll shut down potash production in Saskatchewan. I mean, they treat us like colonial serfs. And, for those of us that live in Western Canada and whose families are in Western Canada and believe that our children deserve a prosperous future, enough is enough. And again, just to give you an idea how idiotic we see politicians in the East, Doug Ford was turning red the other day, threatening to actually flip the switch and cut off power to the northeastern United States, which would actually be an act of war. And we all know that if you shut down a major power grid or crash a power grid, hundreds of people are likely going to die if hospital generators don't turn on properly, traffic lights don't work. I mean, he was like literally threatening war with the United States because he and Trudeau didn't have the common sense just to shut up and ask President Trump what it is exactly that they needed to do to resolve President Trump's concerns about border security.
Yeah. But we should give Doug Ford credit. He's pulling American booze off the shelves that we already paid for.
Yeah, I mean, it's laughable. It's completely laughable. And I have to say, I'm very, very disappointed in my own premier today because, all of the, I would imagine Kenny holdover cabinet ministers who are, basically liberals light, who were locking down Alberta at the behest of Trudeau during COVID, are all supporting the idea that Alberta should be participating in this tariff war instead of following, what I thought was a very sensible policy that Danielle Smith was following of being the only adult in the room and trying to rise above all of this foolishness. And of course, today we see all of them with egg on their face. Mexico has another 30-day extension to work out their problems. And because of the belligerence of Doug Ford and Trudeau, and they've now drug Alberta along with it. There's no, the tariffs are still in place for Canada. Where Mexico, who still has the biggest fentanyl problem, is now given a 30-day reprieve to be given more time to work things out.
Jeffrey, last question. What is the timing of this? When are you meeting with officials from the Trump administration?
I mean, we're working ahead right now. This thing obviously is taking on a life of its own. It may be sooner rather than later. We were on a on a 30-day window. It may be sooner than that. We'll keep people posted as we go. But obviously, we're working diligently to put together briefing packages and assembling materials and questions and things that we want to be exploring with the government of the United or the Trump administration. And obviously, we're consulting with with other Albertans in that regard in terms of the concerns of Albertans that would need to be addressed in the context of a project that's this ambitious. So, we're getting there as soon as we can, but we obviously want to do this in a methodical, professional, and responsible manner. And there's a number of questions and issues that we think the citizens of Alberta will want to have answered, and we want to make sure that we're very well prepared, and we have a list of of all of the appropriate questions to be asked and answered, so that when we come back from that trip to Alberta, we can have a very fulsome discussion with our fellow citizens as to the pros and cons of what we're proposing.
Jeffrey Rath is a lawyer at Rath and Company in Alberta, a seasoned legal advocate with over 2 decades of experience, and again leading the delegation to Washington to explore the possibility of Alberta becoming the 51st state of America. Jeffrey, thank you so much for your time. We'll be following this closely, and I hope we can speak again.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, this is Richard Serrett. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe.